Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk to you about Vedic astrology, its impact on you, how it's reflected in the world around us, and also how it affects your life. Okay, so we have, uh, obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit again about the election cycle. We're a couple of weeks away from the Democratic convention. Apparently, Kamala Harris is I believe the nomination was held. I'm just going to check. And she's the official nominee, but let me just double check to make sure I didn't hear that incorrectly. Um, Something that came up, which was weird. See, um, Harris being issued a warning, which I can't find again. Hold on. Excuse me. Okay, it's all right. It was a relatively uh, what I would call inoffensive warning from James Carville, who was a Democratic strategist, who you may remember from the Clinton years, and he's an interesting character. You can see him on TV a lot, um, and um, so just warning her not to take too extreme a position uh, or too progressive a position. So, all right, so let's get back to this. All right, so that was purely political, but my apologies. Uh, I do Vedic astrology charts. I thought it was something significant, and it may be significant for her strategy, but it's not significant astrologically. The I do teach Vedic astrology. I teach one-on-one. I will teach in classes eventually. I promise you that. I will teach in groups eventually. And the place to contact me for lessons or readings will be 508 525 0001. And you can also contact me at Gary Gomes G at gmail.com. So that's GARYGOMES, the letter G at gmail.com. So it's been kind of an interesting couple of weeks. This is really, it seemed like a lot has happened within the past couple of weeks, and I can tell you why astrologically. It's really a combination of two planets, or actually 2 to 3 planets, uh, conspiring to uh, make a lot of events happen all at once. And I'll explain what those are. Hold on a second while I set the Wayback Machine or set the Go Forward machine for, yeah, that's what we can call the astrology, the Go Forward machine, right? All right, so hopefully this will pop up. All right, so this is a now New Bedford chart, and we can see 2 planets. Now, one's about to turn retrograde, and one has already turned retrograde. So that's Saturn, which essentially slows things down. And what I've noticed whenever it slows things down, it tends to prolong time. It tends to lengthen time. So, so what happened within, let's say, so July 13th, that was around 3 weeks ago. That was a Trump assassination attempt. The week after that, Biden dropped out, and the week after, but the nominee for the party. So essentially, that'll happen, and that was essentially during a Saturn retrograde when Saturn was starting to build up some speed again, but Saturn slowed down, so it made something that happened within a relatively short period of time seem like it took a long time to do. 3 weeks is not a long period of time. The other thing is Mercury cycle about to turn retrograde. It'll turn retrograde within a matter of days, maybe even tomorrow, if I recall correctly. And Mercury retro to slow things down, freeze them in space. The other thing we have right now is Mars is aspecting Mercury. So I'm going to talk about the rhetoric of the campaign in just 1 second. But that has increased the potential of Mars aspecting Mercury and people lying or changing the stories about their past or lying about other people or misrepresenting themselves or going back into old habits. So we had the first thing I want to mention was the media attention on Harris's past record, which to me is the more stunning rewrite of history. So she went from being identified as the border czar back in 2021 to saying, no, she was never the border czar. Now, she may not have received that official title, but she was put in charge of the border. I actually remember the Biden on television talking about it. And even certain news sources which dubbed her the border czar, like Axios, said she was the border czar, and now they're saying she was never the border czar. So this is fascinating, and certain other positions, I never opposed fracking, I never opposed this. So that's come back again. The second thing I've noticed is we have a variation on the term deplorables. So if you recall in the previous campaigns, the Republicans who backed or the people who backed Trump were called deplorables, or essentially not. Now your opinion of them may be that. I don't know. I'm just saying it's just sort of a hit. It's a way of character assassination. In the same way Joe Biden used the term elites against the media when the media wanted him out. So, and higher ups in the party wanted him out. And so essentially you can see that, but now they're using the term weird. So that's sort of like bringing me back to my high school years when the people you didn't like, you would label them as weird. So they would be essentially not able to be talked to or not able to be associated with. So that's a way of marginalizing a person based upon a perceived characteristic. And it essentially is very elegant because you don't have to describe how they're weird. You can just say they're weird. You should want you should want nothing to do with weird people, you know. The third thing is Trump sort of like resorting to more fiery rhetoric. Uh, uh, was used in 2016. So he had that one conciliatory moment at the Republican convention after he'd been shot for about half an hour. And then he sort of like slipped back into Donald Trump mode. So I think all these things indicate what I would call a turning back or even a rebranding of certain strategies that we've seen from the past. And they're all Mercury-based strategies. You know, also, one thing that makes it a little bit worrisome is the labeling that happens in campaigns is a Jupiterian kind of a thing. So essentially, Jupiter, at least as far as I've seen, Jupiter is groups or belonging or standard behavior, you know, it's like recognizable behavior. And we've seen, and that Mars in conjunction with Jupiter sort of makes it a little bit, I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. It makes it okay to attack people who are different from you because they're the enemy, they're the ideological enemy. One planet, so Rahu is the North Lunar Node is usually given some credit for religious fanaticism. I've found as an astrologer through the years that dogma is ruled by Jupiter. So essentially, the strict dogma or the strict non-allowance of differing points of views happens more when Jupiter is in play than when Rahu is in play. With Rahu, it's more of a fear of the foreign. With Jupiter, it's more of a fear of the unorthodox. So if your group identifies with a certain set of norms, it becomes okay to attack a group that doesn't belong to it, that doesn't adhere to those certain set of norms. So that's troubling me, um, basically as an individual who's in kind of a weird field. Okay. Number one, I'm an astrologer. Number two, I do Vedic astrology, which is definitely not normal for a Westerner. And I think that this Jupiter, especially if it's direct, only allows for one right way to do things. Okay, so that's a little bit troubling. So if Mars is creeping up on this Jupiter as it is, they'll be in conjunction within about 2 weeks when the Democratic Convention meets. There will be, I won't say an all-out assault on people who are different, but also uh, it will also encourage violence. It will also encourage demonstrations. It will also encourage violence. So Jupiter is a good planet. It can control Mars to a certain extent, but it also tends to build up. It expands whatever is in conjunction with or whatever it aspects. So it's aspecting Ketu, it's in conjunction with Mars, and it's aspecting our friend over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's aspecting Capricorn. So these traits tend to show up a little bit more strongly right now. And these traits will be in effect really until around, I would say around mid-September. And the thing that bothers me about mid-September through early October is Mars is hovering between, And Mars acts fast. Mars is the fastest acting planet. So this can make an excuse for war, but the thing that bothers me most, and I'll just say one more thing, Mars is in the same sign with Algol and Uranus, which are used in Western astrology, although Algol comes from uh, Arabic astrology, more so than Western. But basically, if you have Mars over here aspecting an eclipse sector, it revs up the potential for assassinations, excuse me, and assassination attempts. So nobody is really safe. And this is also true of what's happening um, in Venezuela, in Iran, in various parts of the world that are unstable. It's not just happening in the United States. So also, we'll look at the world map a little bit later on, and we'll see whether or not that hits hits well. But Mars in Taurus, K2 in Virgo, two disruptive, unexpected event planets um, in Earth signs are not good for earthquakes. They're not good for they're not good for sea disasters because of Rahu being here. So it's going to be a little bit of a dangerous time. Be very careful traveling over the next couple of weeks. It isn't that like you can't travel, but just be extraordinarily careful traveling over the next couple of weeks. Hey, we look at long-term economic situations, we'll see a slight reversal in the economy. Right now, Venus and Mercury are in Maga Nakshatra, which means we're living off inherited wealth or wealth that we're borrowing against because both planets are in the 12th house when I started this recording. And if I go up and update it now, so I got interrupted because my wife was having a health issue. So I went upstairs to check it out. So we're in Scorpio now. Scorpio is rising right now. So again, it's Venus. Venus is the Lord of the 12th house. 10th house Lord is Mercury. So again, it doesn't change the overall the impression I get of the chart that essentially we're borrowing a lot to maintain economic stability. It's a weak moon right now. If you look down here, the moon is almost completely dark. The moon gains strength from wherever it is in the chart in relationship to the sun. So if it's full, it's very strong. Both presidential candidates have full moons. So if it's in that nature, it's very, very strong. But if it's new, it's very, very weak. So this essentially is blocking out. Interestingly enough, it's blocking out public sentiment because the moon is a public planet. So essentially, it's interesting that this would be a situation in which we had a candidate that nobody really voted for getting confirmed as a nominee. I'm just playing. It's just, folks, this is just factual. I'm not, I'm not trying to stoke the fires. Basically, if so let's look at economic factors again. Saturn's aspecting Venus and Mercury, so this can't last long. And we are heading, so job growth was slower than it was expected to be last quarter. It's not a matter of if, but when we we show signs of a recession. The other thing is Saturn aspecting Mercury and Venus. Actually, a lot of the attempts um, to manipulate the news will actually be questioned or be commented on even by what we call the major media outlets, because that Saturn remembers. Saturn as a planet always remember. It always recalls. It always brings back things that you said in the past. Okay, so that's um, it's going to be difficult, especially over the next couple of months, for people to um, move out of that particular cast. If I'm right about um, Kamala Harris's chart, she's going to have a really, so we'll just leave that quickly. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I've spent too much time on these charts. But watch out for war, threat of war over the next month. This is going to be the telltale month. Uh, let's see now. So this is Miss Harris's chart. Um, and if you see over here, she has Venus in Uttara Falguni chart. So she essentially, this is an inheritance nakshatra. Okay. So it's the person who um, contacts uh, behind hidden arrangements, Jupiter retrograde in the 12th house. Mercury in the 5th house is Lord of the 5th. A lot of past life credit, a lot of past life activity. Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury and Rahu are all linked. So the Rahu Venus Mercury subperiod would have been a perfect time for her to reap the benefits uh, of um, of being chosen as a presidential candidate. Her risk comes after August 7th, because although there is this thing called Parivarna Yoga, which is an exchange of lords between Venus and Sun, that Sun is, on the face of it, still a weak Sun. And this can trip her up. This can make her lose favor up until October 2nd. The moon may bring her back because the moon is full, but it's aspected by Saturn. That's a little bit difficult. Debilitated Mars. So that's also another exchange of lords in the chart. There are a lot of exchanges of lords in her chart, a lot. If we go over to Trump's chart, Trump has, just quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Trump. Oh, come on. Please behave. Donald Trump, we got Donald Trump. All right, Donald Trump's chart has a K2 subperiod. So that's an example of really of K2 in his second house. So he'll say some things which are a little bit thoughtless, or K2 is transiting his second house right now. And may put him in a poor light. He's in a K2 Saturn Rahu subperiod. So that was um, the the encounter at the Association of Black Journalists, National Association of Black Journalists conference. But after August 5th, he'll seem to be making more sense. After August 12th, his Mercury is extremely strong. He'll gain a lot of allies all the way up until October 1st. So this could indicate a reversal for him. But I'm thinking that Kamala may be hurt more because of the Mars in the first house and the Mars in the second house as the election rolls up. It's tough to tell at this point. Um, and so that's why I'm not calling it just yet. Although, again, like I said, I do favor Trump in the long term. So let's go back to the birth chart, though. Let's go back to the what's happening now chart and look at the individual signs. So I won't say any more about that. But again, within 2 weeks, a lot of um, big events, maybe even overthrows of governments, not necessarily in the United States. But and I would even say some violent protests. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong about that. But I think even some violent protests at the Democratic convention, mainly because of the Israeli conflict, what's going on in Israel right now in Palestine. That's the obvious thing, but there could be other things that are causing it to heat up. So if we look over here, the chart has Aries rising. So inflation won't go down anytime soon. I just want to go to the US chart one more time. And I do have another US chart, by the way, which my friend likes better, and we'll discuss it on this show. And both charts work to a certain extent. So one's the constitutional birth chart, which would put us in Saturn Mahadasha right now. And the other one's the one I prefer, which puts us in a Rahu Mercury Mahadasha right now. So essentially, this Rahu Mercury Venus right now favors Kamala until around August 17th. Sun Mahadasha doesn't. And there'll be a Moon Mahadasha, so her Mahadashas will be lining up pretty strongly with the major planetary periods of the United States. So that's something that I am paying attention to. But the US charts, Moon is inside of Vishak. It's what's called a 7.5 year period of Saturn. So that will be, it will make people, I would say, retreat a little bit. So and we'll look at the US Constitution chart just quickly. But again, that's my interpretation, and you always have to be really careful about letting your biases rule your judgment. US Constitution birth chart. So this is a friend of mine, David LePage, provided this. Saturn's in the first house. Venus is in the first house. It's in the seventh house, excuse me. And we're in a Saturn major planetary period. So this is interesting because this is Kamala Harris's ninth house. And it's in Trump's seventh house, but also fourth house from the moon. So it sort of limits Kamala's ability to take advantage of it. And we so it does indicate change. But the moon is in Scorpio, which is Donald Trump's lunar sign. So there are a lot of variables here, and I have to really balance it carefully. Um, this is one I'm not really, it's upon the planetary transits and the planetary configurations. There are a lot of changes coming up between now and November 5th. So that's why I'm reserving judgment. But like I said, based upon a lot of superficial factors would favor Kamala, but there are also a lot of superficial factors that would favor Trump. So this will be interesting. This will be an interesting race. So let's get back to your individual signs. So right now, Aries, so let's talk about the week for individual signs. Jupiter and Mars are in the second house. There'll be anger or discussions about money, but although some good money luck from this chart. Uh, Sun, Moon, there'll be a lot of conflicts at home. Venus and Mercury in the fifth. Children will tend to do well, although they will be a little bit tricky. There is a strong potential for illnesses. Saturn's in the 11th, so some slowdown in gains, and again, over expenditure. For Taurus, Taurus has Mars, the Lord of the seventh, in the first house, along with Jupiter, so good for potential gains, although they will be fleeting. And Moon, Sun are in the third house. So it is a good time for the sign to realize some potential gains or some ambitions. Venus and Mercury are in the fourth. That's good for home life, contented home life. Children, K2's in the fifth. Some problems with children and also with stomach. And finally, Saturn's in the 10th. A lot of work for this sign. Who's in the is in the 11th. Don't trust your friends. And also for Gemini, let's go over here. Gemini has the Lord of the first house in the third. So again, good for fulfilling goals or ambitions, writing, things like that. Moon is in the second house along with the sun. That's a good placement for this particular chart. It'll give fulfillment of monetary goals. K2's in the fourth house. That can give some fear or some apprehension about home life. The seventh house Lord, there'll be a lot of dwelling on, I'm sorry, the seventh house Lord is in the 12th. So losses in relationship partners. Saturn's in the ninth house. Some good potential gains, but you'll have to go back and rework some things. Rahu's in the 10th house, good for fame, recognition, success for this sign. But again, it can be a little bit elusive. It can feel close, but not quite within your grasp. All right. So Cancer. Cancer has Sun and Moon in conjunction. It's a new moon, so the moon isn't particularly strong in this chart. There's more focus on financial growth and more focus on family life with the sign. A certain amount of fearlessness, but not a lot of confidence. And finally, Saturn's in the eighth house, so a reconstruction period for the sign. Jupiter and Mars, thank God, are in the 11th house, so that's a good transit for this particular sign. So this should bring some financial gains in. For Leo, Leo has Venus and Mercury in the first house. That's a good combination for financial growth and also for career success for this sign. For K2 in the second house, again, misunderstandings or setbacks. Um, Saturn's in the seventh house. There'll be people working against this sign, people coming out from the past working against this sign, and even partners will be unfortunate for this sign. Rahu's in the eighth. Um, you have to watch out for people doing things behind your back or doing things against you surreptitiously. And finally, we have Jupiter and Mars in the 10th house. Very good placement for the sign, indicates at least success over the next month or so. Even say beyond that. For Virgo, Virgo has K2 in the first house, Rahu in the seventh house. And if we have this particular combination, it's an indicator of very strong discretion. That's why I'm being very careful about what I predict. I have planets close to K2 right now. And from this chart, Venus is in the 12th house, can give a lot of expenses. Third house lord is Mars. Mars is located in the 8th house. So some desires will be hidden away or will have to be deferred for a little while. Fourth house lord is Jupiter, which is placed again in the 8th house. I'm sorry, in the 9th house. So desires will be fulfilled. My apologies. Desires will be fulfilled this month for Virgo. And the Lord of the 4th house in the 9th house will give a lot of learning experiences. My apologies. 5th house Lord is Saturn. Lord of the 5th is in the 6th. So again, some problems with past life luck or past life benefit. Rahu is in the 7th house. This is like some potential problems with the relationship partners or some worries or anxiety about relationship partners. Some health issues for them as well because of this Venus-Mercury conjunction in the 12th. Let's see now. And 9th house, we've already gone over. Some financial gains, though, for this sign and some ability to save. For a Libra rising, a Libra or a Libra sun or Libra moon, Libra has no planets in the 2nd house, although unexpected gains from legacies are indicated through Mars in the 8th house, inheritances. 3rd house Lord is Jupiter, placed in the 8th house, so desires will be fulfilled through. 4th house Lord is Saturn. So the Lord of the 4th and the 5th indicates generally good luck, although you will have to work for it. Rahu is in the 6th house. And I think Rahu in the 6th house will give some health issues to this sign over the next few months. 7th house Lord is Mars in the 8th house, so relationship partners will have health issues, especially with the stomach. And house has Sun and Moon in it, so there should be some good financial gains for this sign over the next couple of months. Okay. For now, again, one thing I'll say, Kamala Harris's son is in this particular sign. The Rahu in the 6th house, I do see what I would call a mini rebellion, or maybe even a popular rebellion against Harris coming up pretty quickly. I don't know if it'll gather any strength because of the Democrat the Democratic Party is very tightly organized. It's not um, it's not as fractious as it was during 1968, uh, or even so they learned from that, and from 1976 and from 1980, and also from 1988, they learned from that uh, to make themselves a much more unified party. But I still think there'll be I would call it a mini revolt. So let's get back to Scorpio. Scorpio has no planets in the first house. The Lord of the first house is Mars. It's in the seventh house, so there'll be a lot of attention to children and also to relationship partners. Saturn's in the fourth, a lot of responsibilities for the sign. And there are a lot of potential things to look at in an individual birth chart. So this is a general reading, but this does indicate high status for this particular sign. Rahu is in but a lot of work. Rahu is in the fifth, some problems with kids. It shows up, maybe even some fights with kids. Overall, good luck for this sign because the sun is in what's called a Bhatika house, so it can hurt confidence of this chart or career for this chart. But overall, it's not a bad placement. And sun will change signs within about 15 days. So it'll go into a more positive sign, a more positive house for this chart. For and K2 Scorpio shouldn't trust their friends. This is what happened to Joe Biden already. All right, so Sagittarius has Jupiter in the sixth house, so it's sort of like in uh, fighting mode with Mars in the sixth house. Saturn's in the third house. That combination tends to make it more aggressive, more determined to win. Rahu is in the fourth house, and if Rahu is in the fourth house, there is some domestic unrest, some dissatisfaction with the state of affairs. Venus and Mercury are in the ninth house. That's not a bad placement, even though they're not good planets for this sign. But that does indicate some financial growth, although, like I said, it's borrowed financial growth. It's not real. And K2's in the 10th house. There's a little bit of an ambition to get some recognition or get some acknowledgement for what you've done. So this isn't a bad chart for Sagittarius. Sagittarius does have to watch out, though, for a tendency to rush into combat or to rush into fights. And since that's the Lord of the chart that I favor for the United States, I'm a little bit worried about us getting involved in a conflict. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn in the second house, a lot of focus on financial security, a lot of retrenching of investments. Rahu will make the sign a little bit greedy and a little bit reckless as well. Mars is in the fifth house, which is a good placement for the sign. Jupiter's in the fifth house, so that does indicate it's not a good time to engage in speculation. Sun and Moon are in the seventh house. Again, stay out of speculative engagements. There will be some slight returns on investments you already made, but I would stay away from new investments or new business partnerships. And finally, we have K2 in the ninth house. K2 in the ninth gives unexpected twists of luck. So just be a little bit careful about investing if you're a Capricorn, or about new business ventures or partnerships. Saturn for Aquarius is in the first house. Again, this gives a rise in position or status. That's a conventional interpretation, but it also indicates a little bit of a backpedaling. That is, you'll have to work for it. Rahu is in the second house. That's generally a good placement for this chart, although it can make the sign a little bit greedy or seem to be a little bit greedy at times. Jupiter and Mars are in the fourth house, so there will be some fighting or arguments with relationship partners. That's underscored by Venus and Mercury being in the seventh house. So relationship partners or business partners may actually misrepresent themselves to you. And let's see now, K2's in the eighth, a lot of interest in metaphysical or spiritual pursuits. Rahu is in the first house for Pisces. We've spoken about this before. It makes a sign very dissatisfied with where it is. It can cause divorces or separations or potential for that. They'll become more of a factor next year when Saturn goes into the sign. Mars is in the fourth house. Mars is in the third house, excuse me. And it's, let me see now, this is third house Lord in the fourth, first house Lord. So a lot of focus on selfish desires for Pisces. Pisces is normally a very nice house, but nice sign, but that's what it shows. Some past life credit, but also some past life struggles coming up because Venus and Mercury are in the sixth house, and Moon and Sun are in the fifth house. K2 relationship partners will seem uneasy or disinterested in you. And finally, Saturn's in the 12th, a lot of expenses. So let's go over to the time-space chart and see the astral mapping and see where things are happening in the world. And I have to click out of this and go back to it again. All right, so we have Mercury, Venus, Saturn near Hawaii. So that to me indicates some inflationary pressure. In Alaska, Hawaii, that's not a surprise. It's not, it's an island, it's isolated from supplies of things. Rahu indicates some political scandal coming down the west coast of the United States, but more in Western Canada. The moon line over here is going through Texas, New Mexico, Montana, and Wyoming. And so that indicates some kind of public disruption around that part of the country, some dissatisfaction with government, especially in these states, and also in Mexico. Let's see now. Venus and Mercury. Now, interesting enough, the Mexican president just came out and said the Venezuelan election results were clean. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. I'm not saying they're clean or not. I don't know, to be honest with you. It isn't something I looked at carefully. There's a Venus Mercury sort of a conjunction between Ohio and Pennsylvania and West Virginia, all the way down to Florida. So that part of the country should experience some intense activity, some intense flooding. So we have a hurricane. Cuba is also engaged in that. Panama is also engaged in that. So is Ecuador and Peru. There is a descending Mars line going through Venezuela, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some violence connected with election results and also some bad luck in Guyana and Bolivia and down into Argentina, some economic restrictions. And we have a Rahu line coming through Brazil, and that to me always indicates some kind of scandal or some kind of disruption. some financial disruption because this Saturn, essentially, Brazil is dominated by Saturn and Rahu right now. So that indicates definitely some political unrest. Um, and also some economic hardship. For there's a descending line going up through the moon. There's a Mars line near Iceland. So again, some possibility of volcanic activity, although I wouldn't bet on that. And some possibility of earthquake activity up near the North Pole. Um, the other thing is that we have this sun and moon line coming close to Britain and France, but not quite there. It looks more like it's affecting Germany. So there'll be dissatisfaction with the government and even some flooding in Italy down through Libya, down through Central Africa, all the way down to Rhodesia, and maybe even South Africa, and maybe even some potential water disasters in that part of the world over here, especially on the West Coast. We have Mercury line running through Greece, so problems. And also, I think some commerce problems hitting Finland and all the way through Belgium, Germany, Greece, Libya. I'm sorry, yeah, Libya, and also up through Egypt, Turkey, Ukraine, and there's a Rahu line. So I'm seeing some unrest. They're panicking or actively opposing the government in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia, the same situation, down through Sudan and down into Madagascar. Now, there's not a lot of activity happening in Iran, although there is a Rahu line right next to Iran. So um, there is worry about a strike, but I think that'll come in 2 weeks. A retaliatory strike will come from Iran within about 2 weeks. There's a moon line running through Western India, Pakistan, and close to Afghanistan. So again, we're talking about flooding problems in this part of the world, governmental support, and some harshness from the government in Russia and down through China and down through India, all the way down to Sri Lanka. We have this Mars line hitting all the way down to Southeast Asia, Mars-Jupiter line, essentially what Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar, and so this part of the world looks like it's going to be pretty chaotic or in a little bit of trouble, all the way down to Indonesia and into Western Australia. There's a Saturn line going into China, which again indicates some economic problem. A Rahu line hitting, encompassing the Philippines, in between Saturn and Rahu, so economic problems. And down here in some political scandal in Australia. And finally, we have moon lines running down towards New Zealand, which again, to me, indicates some kind of problems with food supplies or with rain. Now, I correctly predicted earthquake for California. There's still a danger there, even though the Rahu line is pretty far away. For Turkey, there is danger of, and I'm focusing on these areas because we're looking at strong Saturn or Rahu lines. And also Middle Europe, there's some danger of riots. And Turkey, there's some danger of economic decline. And also through Egypt, down through Sudan and down into South Africa. So again, these will be, and also in China, definitely. Government scandal, probably in Japan. Okay. So these are challenging times. Challenging times also present opportunities. They're not entirely bad, but again, just be really, really careful driving. Be careful not to um, overbid your hand in terms of um, getting into arguments or getting into uh, fights. Be careful of your health next month and over the next couple of months. Especially watch out for stomach or kidney or liver complaints. And again, it is a good opportunity to learn a lot, to do a lot more, and also to uh, learn a lot more about yourself, and also to clean up anything that you have left undone. Okay, so that's it for this week. My name is Gary Gomes. It's been a pleasure. Please um, subscribe, like, and share. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I love you all, and thank you so much for watching. It's been my great honor to serve. Thank you. And prayers for all my friends who are going through difficulties right now.